He thought he'd destroyed me by framing me for his secret organized scheme, but I just found the evidence of his prohibited substances. Now, his attempt to ruin my life with a felony charge is about to land him a huge sentence instead. I watched Mark's expensive Italian leather shoes click against the polished marble floor of the courthouse, the sound echoing like a victory march. He didn't just walk, he strutted. He paused just long enough to lean down, his face inches from mine, smelling of high-end cologne and cold triumph. "You're nothing without my name, Sarah," he whispered, his voice dripping with a cruel kind of satisfaction. "I hope you enjoy that studio apartment in the city. I hear the cockroaches are friendly this time of year. Don't bother looking for the alimony. My lawyers ensured you won't see a cent of my hard-earned empire." I sat there frozen as he walked away with his team of high-priced sharks. For 12 years, I had been his silent partner, the woman who managed his life, his social image, and even his business logistics when he was too busy to handle the details. But in the eyes of the law, thanks to a mountain of falsified documents and hidden accounts, I was leaving with nothing but a suitcase and a few $100s in a checking account he hadn't bothered to drain yet. He had stripped me of my dignity, my home, and even the inheritance my grandmother had left me, which he had invested into a shell company that mysteriously went bankrupt a month before he filed for divorce. The walk to my new home was a blur. It was a cramped fourth-floor walk-up with peeling wallpaper and a radiator that hissed like a cornered animal. I sat on the edge of the twin bed, staring at the single cardboard box I had managed to take from the mansion. It contained personal mementos, mostly old photos and a few electronics. As I reached into the box, my hand brushed against something heavy and cold. It was an old external hard drive I hadn't seen in years. I remembered it was the drive I used for my photography business before I gave it up to support Mark's career. I plugged it into my aging laptop, hoping to find some old photos to remind me of who I was before I became Mrs. Mark Sterling. But when the drive spun to life, the folders that appeared weren't labeled Summer 2018 or Wedding Portfolio. Instead, the screen was filled with encrypted files and spreadsheets titled Logistics Alpha and Secondary Distribution. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I realized this wasn't my drive at all. It was Mark's. He must have grabbed the wrong one from the home office during the frantic days of the move-out, or perhaps he had hidden it among my things years ago, thinking I'd never look. I spent the next 6 hours bypassed simple passwords I'd seen him use 1,000 times. When the first spreadsheet opened, my breath hitched. This wasn't just corporate tax evasion. This was a detailed log of an organized scheme. There were records of prohibited substances being moved through his shipping containers, disguised as luxury furniture. There were lists of names, high-ranking officials, local politicians, and people I recognized from our charity galas, all receiving consultation fees that looked a lot like bribes. Mark hadn't just built a business empire, he had built a network for a massive group involved in moving illegal cargo across borders. The more I scrolled, the more I realized that this was a map of a massive organized scheme that had been operating under everyone's noses for a decade. The risk was astronomical. If Mark found out I had this, he wouldn't just sue me, he would ensure I disappeared. Just as I was about to close the laptop, a new notification popped up on the screen. It was an automated sync from a hidden cloud account linked to the drive. A video file appeared, dated only 2 days ago. I clicked play, and my blood turned to ice. It was a recording from a hidden camera in a warehouse. Mark was there, standing over a crate, laughing with 2 men I didn't recognize. He reached into the crate, pulled out a small, vacuum-sealed bag of a grayish powder, and nodded. "The shipment is ready," Mark said on screen. "If the Internal Security Department asks, it's just marble dust for the sculptures. We move the rest of the prohibited substances tonight." Suddenly, the silence of my apartment was shattered by a heavy, rhythmic thudding. Someone was pounding on my door, the wood groaning under the force. I froze, my hand hovering over the power button. A voice, low and menacing, drifted through the thin walls. "Sarah, I know you're in there. Open the door. We know you took something that doesn't belong to you, and Mark wants it back. Now." The pounding on the door grew more violent, the frame splintering with every blow. My heart was a frantic bird trapped in my chest. I didn't have time to pack, didn't have time to cry. I grabbed the hard drive and my laptop, shoving them into my backpack alongside a stray charger. I looked at the window. The rusted fire escape was my only hope. I scrambled out just as I heard the heavy crack of the door finally giving way. The sound of boots hitting the floorboards echoed behind me as I descended the metal stairs, my hands shaking so hard I nearly lost my grip. I hit the pavement of the alleyway and didn't look back. I ran until my lungs burned, weaving through the late evening crowds of the city, trying to become invisible. I ended up in a 24-hour diner 3 miles away, tucked into a corner booth where I could see the entrance. My hands were still trembling as I pulled out my phone. I couldn't call the police. Not yet. The spreadsheets I'd seen listed names that made my stomach churn. If the local authorities were on Mark's payroll, I'd be walking straight into a trap. I opened the laptop again, using the diner's spotty Wi-Fi to mask my location through a VPN I'd set up years ago for my photography business. I needed to know exactly how deep this hole went. I navigated to a folder I'd missed earlier, tucked inside a directory labeled Personal Assets. It wasn't about money. It was a folder titled The Contingency. Inside were scanned documents that made the room spin. Mark hadn't just been hiding money. He had been building a narrative. There were photos of me, taken from angles I didn't recognize, standing near shipping containers. There were forged signatures on receipts for packages with the substance and lease agreements for warehouses I'd never visited. He hadn't just planned to leave me penniless. He had been preparing to frame me for the entire organized scheme if the Internal Security Department ever caught wind of his operations. He was setting me up to face a serious charge, an attempt to break my life with a felony that would carry a huge sentence. He wanted me to be the fall girl for his entire network. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. He had spent years smiling at me over dinner while documenting my involvement in his crimes. Every vacation, every business trip he'd taken me on, it was all evidence he was manufacturing against me. If he couldn't control me through marriage, he would control me through a prison cell. I realized then that I couldn't just hide. I had to strike first. But I needed an ally, someone outside his circle of influence. I thought of Elias Thorne. He was a disgraced former investigator for the Internal Security Service who had been obsessed with Mark's shipping company years ago. Mark had used his influence to get Elias fired and blacklisted. If anyone knew how to navigate this shadow world, it was him. I found his contact information through an old digital archive and sent a single encrypted message. I have the Logistics Alpha Drive. Meet me where the sun doesn't shine. It was a reference to an old case Elias had worked on involving a subway bypass. An hour later, I was standing in the shadows of an abandoned subway entrance, the air damp and smelling of old iron. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall, gaunt, with eyes that looked like they hadn't seen sleep in years. Elias Thorne didn't say hello. He just looked at the backpack clutched to my chest. "You have no idea what you've walked into, Sarah," he rasped. "Mark isn't just the boss. He's the middleman for something much larger. If they find you here, they won't just take the drive." "I know he's framing me," I said, my voice finally finding its strength. "I have the evidence of the organized scheme. I have the videos of the prohibited substances." Elias took a step toward me, his expression unreadable. He reached out his hand for the backpack. "Give it to me. I can get this to the right people. People who aren't on his payroll." I started to hand it over, but then my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. I glanced down and my breath stopped. It was a photo of me and Elias, taken from just a few yards away right now. Underneath the photo was a message. "Check his left pocket, Sarah. Ask him who paid for his new life." I froze, my fingers tightening on the straps of my bag. I looked up at Elias, who was still holding his hand out, a small, tight smile forming on his lips. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice a little too smooth. As he moved, the fabric of his jacket shifted, and I saw the distinct shape of a heavy, illegal weapon tucked into his waistband, and a flash of a familiar gold coin peeking out of his pocket, the same coin Mark gave to his most loyal associates. I didn't wait for Elias to finish his sentence. I didn't give him the chance to draw that illegal weapon. I swung my heavy backpack with everything I had, catching him square in the face. As he stumbled back, clutching his nose, I turned and bolted into the pitch-black maze of the subway tunnels. I knew these tunnels. I'd spent months photographing the city's underground history for a project Mark had eventually forced me to abandon. I navigated by touch and memory, sliding through a narrow maintenance crawl space just as the heavy thud of Elias's boots echoed behind me. I didn't stop until I reached a public library on the other side of the city, miles away from the subway and the shadows of my past. My hands were steady now, fueled by a cold, sharp rage that had replaced my fear. I sat at a terminal in the back and began to work. I didn't just look at the spreadsheets this time. I looked at the metadata. Mark had been sloppy. He thought I was too simple to understand the technical side of his business. He was wrong. I discovered that the Internal Security Department had already opened a secret file on Mark's shipping company. They were just missing the final piece of the puzzle, the direct link between the prohibited substances and Mark's personal accounts. I had that link. I also found something even more delicious, the proof that Mark had used corporate funds to pay off his divorce lawyers and the consultants who had helped him hide my inheritance. I spent the next 4 hours uploading every single byte of data from the logistics alpha drive to a secure encrypted server belonging to the high-level Internal Security Department task force. I didn't stop there. IBCC'd the city's most relentless investigative journalist, a woman Mark had once called a nuisance over dinner. I included the photos of the framed evidence Mark had gathered against me, proving he was trying to set me up for a huge sentence to cover his own tracks. The next morning, I didn't hide. I went to Mark's favorite high-end breakfast club, the place where he went to be seen. I sat at the table right across from him, wearing the same clothes from the night before, my hair a mess but my eyes burning. Mark looked up, his face twisting into a sneer. "Sarah, you look like you've been living in the gutter already. Come to beg for a few more dollars?" "I'm not here for money, Mark," I said, my voice carrying across the quiet, expensive room. "I'm here to watch the show." He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "What show? Your breakdown? I have my people looking for you, Sarah. You took something of mine, and when they find you—" "They already found me," I interrupted, gesturing to the entrance. The heavy glass doors of the club swung open. It wasn't Elias or Mark's thugs. It was a team of stone-faced agents from the Internal Security Department, led by a woman in a sharp navy suit. They didn't go for me, they walked straight to Mark. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. The lead agent pulled out a warrant. "Mark Sterling, you are under arrest for leading an organized scheme, the distribution of prohibited substances, and witness tampering. We have the logistics alpha drive." Mark's face went from tanned to a sickly, chalky white. He looked at me, then at the agents. "This is a mistake, my wife. She's the one. I have proof she was the one running the warehouses." The agent didn't even blink. "We've seen your proof, Mr. Sterling, along with the digital trail showing you forged every bit of it. We also have the video of you in the warehouse 2 nights ago. You're facing dozens of years, possibly an enormous term in a federal facility." As they clicked the cuffs around his wrists, the club's television screens, usually flickering with stock prices, suddenly switched to a breaking news report. The journalist I had emailed was standing in front of Mark's corporate headquarters. She was detailing the entire group's operations, the bribes to local officials, and the shocking attempt to frame an innocent woman. Mark was dragged out of the club in front of his peers, his legacy crumbling with every step. But the best part came a week later. Because the evidence showed that Mark had committed perjury and used illegal funds to manipulate our divorce proceedings, the entire settlement was vacated. The judge didn't just give me my inheritance back. She awarded me 70% of Mark's remaining legal assets as restitution for his attempt to break my life with a felony charge. I didn't go back to the mansion. I sold it, along with the luxury cars and the expensive art. Now I stand on the balcony of a modest but beautiful studio in a city halfway across the world, my camera in hand. Mark is currently awaiting trial, facing a huge sentence that will ensure he never sees the sun from outside a barred window again. He thought he could leave me penniless and broken, but in trying to bury me, he forgot one thing. I was the one who kept his world running, and I was the only one who knew exactly how to tear it down. The view from here is perfect. For the first time in 12 years, I am finally free.